Welcome back to the Epic Universal Podcast. I'm entertainer writer Jim Hill, and I'm joined this evening by my co host, Eric Hersey, and he and I are recording this week's episode on Tuesday, May 7th, 2024. And so, Eric, we are now just 2 months out from the release of Despicable Me 4, which hits theaters on July 3rd. We got our second trailer for that Illuminations movie today. Did you get a chance to check that out?
Thankfully, Jim, you tipped me off, and I went over, and it was only 5 hours old, so I felt like I was on the cutting edge.
Well, there you go. So, all right, big question: are we ready for the Mega Minions?
I think it's going to answer a very important question that everyone has been asking. Is there really superhero fatigue? Because we're going to find out. If this does really well, then the whole superhero fatigue thing is out the door, and they're just tired of Marvel. And they're but yeah, I'm all for it. I looked at it and I said, this could be funny. This is a nice riff. I had to get reacquainted. I haven't seen a Minions movie for quite some time, so I have to come back around. But I thought it was a good take. What's your opinion on it?
I have been a fan of this Despicable Me series since the first film, and I want to say 2010 now. So always enjoyed seeing some Minions, and more to the point, to see them. What is it? We had a Ben Grimm, the Thing Minion. Right. I think that was Jerry, and we also had a Scott Summers Cyclops Minion. That was Mel. So, of course, my question is, how does this work? Are we going to actually get walk around versions of the Mega Minions over in the Universal Parks? And if so, will they be allowed to journey out into Marvel Superhero Island?
Well, maybe that's what will take over the land. Who knows? I thought it was kind of genius with the Cyclops. I thought that was brilliant. So, and I watched the trailer today, and I felt I understand the origin story of a villain, because there's many times at the gas pump with the actual credit card that I say to myself, this could be a turning moment. This is indeed the origin story. So I feel the pain of, and I'm not sure who this new villain is, but I always enjoy the villains.
Well, he's being voiced by Will Ferrell, and you are not alone. In fact, Nancy and I are now, I think we are 4 weeks into. We had used our Cumberland Farms gas card so often that it wore out. And so we have been battling with the Cumberland Farms Corporation to get a replacement card. And it the whole notion of, look, I'm trying to give you money. Give me my card. And they're like, well, you have to go to the website. And you have to call a phone number that nobody ever answers. And it's just sort of like, so yes, to see a supervillain dealing with that at the pump was like, yeah, that's a little too close to home. I may need to go lie down.
Right.
Anyway, also, Despicable Me 4, again, coming out July 3rd, will be supported by a full retail line, and many of those items are coming from Moose Toys. This is an Australian company that has done actually a wonderful job with the Bluey action figures.
Listen, hold on real quick. You and Drew are doubling down. I listened to the latest episode just earlier, and you guys are doubling down on those Australian sheepdogs or so forth.
Well, just I am always fascinated when something is just existing, just out there, and then it has its moment, and it suddenly crosses over into a pop culture thing. And so, we've got this Bluey stage show coming to Boston, and we had people losing their mind on social media because the Bluey's family almost moved. And it's like, prior to this, Eric, the reason that Bluey came on my radar is I was, how you go to a Cracker Barrel,
right?
And they have that gift shop, and it's just like, you just want to pay your bill, you just want to go, but I was there in line waiting to pay my bill after Nancy and I had gone out to lunch, and my eyes slid over to, they were selling Bluey action figures, and it was literally, I want to say, Bluey and his little sister Bandit and a toilet. And it was one of these things where, that's an action figure set, the two little dogs in a toilet. It's like, I had questions, and I'm still trying to get answers to the
Well, I
questions.
think
But
that's a perfect segue to what you were just about to talk about.
yes, that's the other thing. Is like I I cannot for the life of me. You know, there's a meeting. You know, there's a conference room. You know, there are prototypes built. But to be an adult who's wearing a tie and sit down at the table and lie, we're here for the meeting for the ultimate fart blaster, you know, and the fact that the guys in R&D have invented a fart gun that shoots visible rings, and it's just, and the notion that somewhere at Moose Toys, they had to go to a factory and hand them the specs and build multiple versions of this. And the notion that each of these has to come with a little vial of fart material that you load into the gun. And by the way, you have two choices, folks. You can either put banana scented in, and that's what the visible, and these visible rings can go 6 feet before they dissipate. And then there is, surprise, surprise, stuff that smells like farts. And it just sort of like, it just reminds me of that story about Michael Eisner when they had the meetings for It's Tough to Be a Bug at Animal Kingdom. And they had they had to pick the smell that went into the theater when Claire de Room, the
Right.
stink bug, turned. And it's just the notion of, Michael Eisner insisted on personally being in that meeting. It's just the notion of, don't you're a CEO of a major media company. Don't you have better things to do with your time? No, I need to go to the fart meeting.
That's it.
So
what kind of candle always makes that
yeah,
scent?
there we go.
Hey, Jim, listen. Every time we walk down the aisle at a Walmart or so forth, they always have like the sounding ultimate fart blasters or the fart blasters in general. And the kids are all about it. And I do believe I had a 1.0 when the first film came out. My first child, we had the 1.0. So those will sell. And the whole scent thing, we once had an air cannon, and you could do the same thing with a toy air cannon by spraying like deodorant or Axe spray back in the day. So like this is actually a very fun toy. So
I'm sorry. I think the Geneva Convention has outlawed the use of air cannons and Axe cologne.
Right.
But anyway, all right. So obviously, folks, we're off to a classy start here, and the folks at Turing Plans really now are proud of the fact that they are our sponsors. And speaking of which, today's show is sponsored by TuringPlans.com, and Turing Plans helps you save time and money at theme parks like Universal Studios and the Magic Kingdom, Walt Disney World. So you can check them out at TuringPlans.com. All right. And of course, the very smart people work at Turing Plans, among them Len Testa, who I do the Disney Dish podcast with. And on our most recent episode, Len and I reviewed some of the news that was revealed just this past week about Super Nintendo World, which is, of course, one of the new lands at Epic Universe, which will be Universal Orlando's third theme park. And no, we are not counting Volcano Bay. That's a water park, not a theme park. Although, Eric, I think you pointed out in your research. Yeah, they
right off the get-go on the video this week. I'm trying to find the name. Is it Molly Murphy or something in that rather? She must be the head of something. Our fourth theme park. Either way, I digress.
Here we go. All right. So anyway, folks, this has been a big news week for Universal Parks and Experiences, which is why Mr. Hersey and I have going to do things a little different this week. Front half of Epic Universal podcast this time around, Eric and I will be reviewing all the info that came out in regards to, again, Super Nintendo World announcement. And then second half of the show, we'll be doing news or not. So upside of that is we'll be able to clear the decks news-wise this week. Downside, second half of the Universal Classic Monsters feature. Apologies, that's going to be pushed off till our next episode of the Epic Universal podcast. But sorry about that delay. Promise the story will be worth the wait. But Eric, okay, so let's dive into this. And now, just a quick look back before we get started here. Thanks to the efforts of the Permit Princess, Alicia Stella, and His Eminence BioReconstruct, we have known for months what's been going on behind those construction fences around along Major Boulevard. But as for the official announcements that have been coming from the Universal Parks and Experiences, that's been more of a breadcrumby experience. I mean, for example, we learned the names of the Stella Nova and Terra Luna hotels back on December 5th. The park itself was formally revealed January 30th. We got an overview of the park, but with a primary focus on the Celestial Park portion, sort of the center of the park. Back on March 28th, we got all sorts of info about the Isle of Berk, the How to Train Your Dragon themed land. And then this past Friday, we got news about the Florida version of Super Nintendo World. So do you want to start with what we're supposed to get?
Sure. I think it was a fun little announcement they had. The YouTube videos are always great, and they kind of gave you a sneak peek where it was very difficult to differentiate their artist renderings from anything else that looked like a video game, which is kind of apparent to it. But I'm very excited, and I think this is one of the lands that I think most people were very much waiting for, because what do we have? One over in Japan, we have one in Hollywood, and now they're finally coming to Florida, which is really gonna grab a lot of people over, as we talked about in previous shows. So one of the major attractions, and you can tell me, Jim, because I think you guys did this over in Hollywood, is the Mario Kart Bowser's Challenge. So that's actually Team Mario versus Team Bowser, and it's almost it's taking care of like Mario Kart, right? It is like a Mario Kart, not simulation, but emulating that kind of experience with a Golden Cup. Looking to get the Golden Cup. So it's using augmented reality. So I've saw basically you're wearing some type of like visor, and I'm very curious on how this works. But it looks like you kind of go around in a dark ride-esque, but I'm not sure about the screens and so forth. So Jim, you guys did this, right?
Well, we did. You know, it was myself, Mr. Tessa, and Mr. Schul. We went March of last year. I want to say the land had only officially been open in Hollywood since February. And I'm not going to lie to you, Eric. It was still having technical issues at the time. In fact, it was a full 2-hour commitment just to get through the queue. And even at that point, the ride went down, and Universal basically made an announcement to the effect of, we don't know when it's coming back up. So if you want to bail out of line, feel free. But we hung in there. And eventually what happens is you climb down into a race car, and you put on your Mario-esque hat, which has a heads-up display in front of you. And what's interesting is you then proceed to drive through these hyper-realistic physical environments, but at the same time, on your heads-up display, in your visor, you're seeing all sorts of graphics straight out of the game, and you're supposed to be firing at things and steering the car, and it was a lot to take in.
It seems.
Yeah. But on the other hand, it is one of those rides where the repeatability is just baked in. Just sort of like, as soon as you get off, you're like, you either had such a wonderful time you want to re-ride, or now after you 3 or 4 minutes in, you finally figured out how to do it. It's like, okay, let me do this again and see how I can do. So
that sounds, and the good news is, at least it's already been replicated. So there's one there's one in Hollywood, and there was one in Japan, right?
Yeah. Now the one in Japan, now, was kind of interesting there. The original Super Nintendo World with its Mario Kart ride was supposed to open in Japan in March of 2021. In fact, the idea was that it was supposed to be up and running in time for the Summer Olympics, which were going to be held in Tokyo that year. But then, of course, pandemic derails everything. So, as a direct result, what was supposed to have originally opened in summer of 2020, sorry, I misspoke myself there, wound up opening in March of 2021. And then almost 2 years later, we got the Los Angeles version opening in February 2023. But it's worth noting that we did not get everything in Hollywood that Japan got, which actually brings us to our next ride that was revealed for Super Nintendo World, the version being built in Florida.
Yeah, and this one is pretty exciting. This is Yoshi's Adventure. So you've probably seen BioReconstruct had some great photos for months even ago of the Yoshi vehicles being unwrapped and so forth. So this is a I better or worse, I call it a Yoshi people mover, because ultimately it's like a slower ride you go through. But from what I gather, it is really to take in the sights and the experience of the land. Is that what you've kind of gathered?
I've seen BioReconstruct's photos, and likewise I've seen some onboard videos from the Universal Studios Japan version of this ride. And you're not wrong. I mean, it's more of a gentle, kid-friendly experience. I mean, you're supposed to be searching for all sorts of glowing eggs, and at the same time you're encountering different characters from the Nintendo games. It's a sweet, gentle, kid-friendly experience. So and what's kind of interesting is my understanding about why this didn't make the cut for Hollywood, but did make it to Orlando, was it was literally about the footprint, the available square footage down on the lower lot when it came to building the California version of Super Nintendo World. It's like, we just don't have the real estate, so something's got to fall off the table. So this is what did. So it's going to be interesting to see if this also helps move the needle, so to speak, makes people think, well, I have to go to the Super Nintendo World in Florida. They're the ones with the Yoshi adventure. But also another aspect of this is dining, which brings us to the next thing they announced.
Right, and that's Toadstool Cafe. So that is where you can essentially get tasty dishes inspired by the world of Super Mario and its characters. So there is a super mushroom soup, a piranha plant caprese, some flour spaghetti, and meatballs, and so much more. So there's all types of, I mean, literally, we're eating Mario food. That's pretty darn cool. Did you get to experience this at all when you were in Hollywood?
To be honest, when you go to a theme park with a Jim Schul and a Len Testa, you're there to ride the ride. Len's there to sort of get info that he can then share with the folks who do the unofficial guide and touring plans. And Mr. Schul is there to just view the mechanic,
right,
how the queue works, how the ride system, what the throughput is, and that sort of thing. So ultimately, we just did not get into the restaurant, though. Again, I've seen video, and I've had friends who enthuse greatly about what's there, especially the the flat screen video element that sort of get to look beyond the restaurant, so to speak, into the kitchen where Toad and his crew are making your meals. So again, looking forward to getting back there. This summer when the bunch of us are out there for D23 Expo.
Right.
They're largely to do the 60th anniversary stuff for the tram tour, but we will definitely make time for a meal at the Toadstool Cafe.
Right, and then you could possibly even stop off at a Yoshi shack. I'm sure they have some type of snack island. Well, at least in Orlando, there's going to be a Yoshi snack island and a Turbo Boost treats. So those are other places you can eat, along with the One Up Factory and Mario Motors. So that's more shopping experience. So there are some stores there. And of course, I wanted to find this out to see who are we meeting and greeting here. But you do have an opportunity to meet Mario, Luigi, Princess Peach, and Toad throughout the Super Mario Land.
Yeah, Toad is kind of a new addition, so to speak, or at least out in LA, and it's kind of a fascinating outfit because a lot of the performer who's playing Toad is up in the mushroom caps, so to speak. But to watch how they try to do their hands and interact with her was
Yeah,
charming.
I would love to see that. Love to see that. Well,
Hmm.
Jim, the one thing
Okay.
that I didn't realize until this video, I had no idea that there's two
Hmm.
separate lands here. Like Super Nintendo World is not
Yeah.
just Super Mario World, which I'm sure everybody will
Mhm.
confuse and call it that for eons. There is
Mhm.
Donkey Kong Country,
Mhm.
which is a separate portal.
Yeah. And this is now what's kind of interesting is that this is an expansion land for Japan. In fact, we just recently got an announcement because it was supposed to open in spring of 2024. But there have been some issues, and the Universal Parks and Experience people, like I said, just last month, explained that because they want to deliver the best possible product, the opening of the Japan version of Donkey Kong Country has been pushed off to the second half of 2024. And as Ms. Chester would point out, it's like, well, what you're saying is you don't know when over that 6 month span this is going to open, right? It could be July
Hmm.
1st, could be December 31st. But again, they at least gave us a heads up. But so I think a lot of folks, especially with the flyovers and that sort of thing that Bioreconstruct has been doing, wanted to see this ride in action, because to look down at it being constructed with its gaps in the track and where your vehicle was supposed to jump and all that, it's like, how exactly is that supposed to work?
Right.
And in fact, do you want to describe the ride experience?
Well, it's the mine cart. So if anybody that's played the old Donkey Kong games, and listen,
Hmm.
I played from the Super Nintendo back
Hmm.
in the day. That's where we were first introduced, at least I recall. There's
Hmm.
the mine carts that you go through. So you're going to hop into a mine cart, and
Hmm.
then whether it's Donkey Kong, Diddy Kong, it's a family coaster. So why wouldn't
Hmm.
it be the whole family of the Kongs helping you out? But one of the things that I found was really interesting is that
Hmm.
essentially while you're riding this coaster, like you said, there are gaps in the track, and whatever the mechanism is makes it appear that you're flying,
Hmm.
right? And I've
Yep.
seen some pictures, and I'm not sure if they were permits or how they were, but there are some people out there that are showcasing how this is kind of done. But it is going to be breathtaking, especially when you walk in and you see these carts kind of going off the rails, literally. And that is going to be a great visual, and it looks like a fun coaster. It really does.
No, no, no. I agree. I agree. But again, hopefully, sometime in the next couple of months, we'll get some footage of this thing in action coming out of Japan.
Right.
In fact, by the way, just want to give a brief nod of thanks to the folks who have been over in Japan getting the photos and the videos coming out of Fantasy Springs. Have you seen that stuff?
I got to see a little bit of it. I believe we edited some type of video in this last
Hmm.
month, and they all kind of blend together where we got to
Hmm.
play with some, and it's quite amazing. But I listen, some of the stuff
Hmm.
over in Japan has,
Hmm.
and even the foreign parks. For Disney have been really impressive. I remember just looking at the Beauty and the Beast animatronics, and I'm like, my goodness, this is incredible what they're doing. So
I don't know. They do some great work over there. But you pivoting back now to Super Nintendo World for Florida, you after watching the video and looking at the images that Universal Parks and Experiences released, had some thoughts about this land
well.
for Epic Universe.
Well, one of the first things that I thought is like if we could buy stock in like the local Sherwin-Williams there, because my thought is just when you go in there, it looks like a video game, and it is greenest of all
Yeah,
greens, bluest of all
yeah.
blues. How
Mhm.
is the Florida sun gonna impact that? And are we gonna see like refurbishment consistently, or how long does the paint? How long will that kind of take, or is it just going to get beat up? Or do by now the technology for theme park maintenance is better, and we don't have to see that kind of stuff? So, what's your thoughts on that? Because it is different than
It
Hollywood.
is. Well, and what's kind of interesting in Hollywood is there were things that were painted, there were things that were printed and put up, and yes, again, it's always a challenge for ops to keep things looking good, especially, for example, I remember when we were in the queue space for Bowser's Challenge, and just people were reaching out and touching everything. So, for example, the chain that was holding the giant chain that was holding the drawbridge for Bowser's Castle in place was already coming apart because people just couldn't help themselves and say, "Oh my God, look at the giant chain!" So yeah, I'm going to be interested to see. And in fact, it's Jim Hill who tells the story that the cultural difference between way people behave at Disney parks in, say, Japan versus the way they behave in theme parks in the States. He was talking about how, for example, if you go through the queue of Splash Mountain in Tokyo, there are props within arm's reach that are pristine. And again, that thing opened in what, 1990? But it's just the whole notion of, well, no, it's a lovely prop. I'm waiting to get in the ride. I'm not
Jim,
supposed to reach.
listen, I was
and
in the
make it.
queue for Tron at Magic
Yeah.
Kingdom maybe
Yep.
2 months after it opened. And there's this
Right.
little hallway once you get in that has, and
Mm.
people peeled all of the black wallpaper off. And I looked at my daughter and I said, well, this is going to happen. The next time we came, which was months
Yep.
later, they had to
Yep.
change out the wallpaper was gone because they're like, well, we're never going to be able to keep this. They changed the entire setting to the point where there's nothing you can do. So it's a different environment, but needless to say, we'll see how the paint crew goes.
There we go.
They did make a statement in this video that I thought was pretty impressive and probably correct. And I would love to get your take on this. They said this is the future of immersive experiences. And as I did the virtual walkthrough and went into this, there is not a land, and I've been to the Star Wars, I've been to the Pandoras. This has to be the best converted land that you walk into and you literally feel immersed by the game. And they're known for that with Harry Potter in the first place. To have two, that's pretty impressive.
Now, it's interesting you mention games because when I went to the press event for Guardians of the Galaxy Mission Breakout and I got to talk with Joe Rohde, he talked about how now when you do a theme park attraction, I mean, when Walt did it, it was the film vocabulary. You had, your establishing shot. You literally stood on Main Street and you looked, the long shot was there's a castle in the distance. And then you walked up and you had your medium shot of the castle right in front of you. And then you had a close up. Whereas nowadays, you actually have to, because so many people, their entertainment is gaming. And the notion of in a game, it's 360 degrees of story. And you have to for that audience deliver 360 degrees of story. So he was talking about, for example, how when you enter the lobby of the old Tower of Terror Hotel that's now the Tivian collection, the collector's great hoard of treasures, they had to put objects hanging down from the ceiling and behind you and next to you and all different parts of your sight line in order to deliver entertainment for gamers. And so that's a thing I think you nailed in one, is that with this Super Nintendo world, you walk into this space and it's like, my God, I'm inside of the game. I've come through a giant green tube and here I am. So yeah, now, but at the same time, you pointed out that maintaining that is going to be a challenge, and it'll just be interesting to see if Universal is in fact up for that challenge. Anyway, okay, so just to remind folks, we still have 2 other lands we need detailed videos about. We, of course, have Dark Universe, which will be home to an updated version of the Universal Classic Monsters, and the Wizarding World of Harry Potter, Ministry of Magic, And again, I think it was Alicia who caught. Did you see where she caught a photo of the ride vehicles for the Ministry of Magic ride, which are in essence giant elevator cars? That evidently somebody had them on a flatbed and they were driving them up I-4 to the work site. So looking forward to that video.
That's it.
All right. Anyway, speaking of other stuff we are looking forward to, we of course have news or not on the second half of today's show. But before we get to that, we've got this.
Hey, it's Kaylee Cuoco for Priceline. Ready to go to your happy place for a happy price? Well, why didn't you say so? Just download the Priceline app right now and save up to 60% on hotels. So whether it's Cousin Kevin's Kazoo Concert in Kansas City, go Kevin, or Becky's Bachelorette Bash in Bermuda, you never have to miss a trip ever again. So download the Priceline app today. Your savings are waiting.
Go to your happy place for a happy price. Go to your happy price, Priceline.
And we're back. Okay. Just a quick reminder here, folks, that we are recording this week's show on Tuesday, May 7th. And this past weekend, a number of places, including the Disney Cruise Lines, did a halfway to Halloween announcement. Did you see this where they were like showing off the costumes that the characters will be wearing on the Disney Cruise Line as part of Halloween?
I saw it as a thumbnail, but it didn't have a clickbaity enough title for me to click. So I saw it in passing. So we'll I know it happens, but
okay. Then somebody didn't do their job. If you're not clicking, that's like, all right,
somebody didn't get paid.
But what's interesting is out in California, again, because we're halfway to Halloween, we saw a display go up in the Universal Plaza area at Universal Studios Hollywood, promoting Halloween Horror Nights 2024, Where Horror Lives. Now, what's kind of interesting, Eric, is that we still don't have any official dates yet for the West Coast version of Halloween Horror Nights. Whereas, as we mentioned on our last episode of Epic Universal Podcast, we know Florida version runs from August 3rd through November 3rd. And we also know, thanks to His Eminence BioReconstruct, who in a recent flyover of the Universal Studios Florida Park spied 2 new sprung tents. These are these giant temporary structures they put up to stage some of the mazes in. And if I'm looking at this photograph correctly, what they did is they put these 2 new sprung tents on the site where they used to park the Mardi Gras and the Christmas floats for the park. So it's like, okay, so where did those end up? Also, speaking of Halloween horror related stuff, again, the things that are done in Orlando and LA, those are seasonal, after hour, hard tickets. Whereas what's going up in Vegas, over at Area 15, that's a year-round thing, Eric. And Universal Horror Unleashed, it's part of a 20-acre complex that's being built at the corner of Meade Avenue and Rancho Drive. We got our project officially announced October of 2023, and construction began on this 110,000 square foot structure late last year. And folks have been nice enough to drive by the work site, and construction has gone vertical. And we do have some general information, again, thanks to permits. Looks like it's going to have 4 houses. There will be a central area, and this is from the official description, Eric, with eerie eateries and bone-chilling bars. But evidently the central area between the 4 houses is going to kind of double as a scare zone, character meet and greet, with also there'll be something equivalent to the tribute store that you find at inside of Universal Studios Florida these days, where you can go to get merch keying off of the Universal Horror Unleashed experience. Meanwhile, if we take a look down in Frisco, Texas, early work is being done at the 97-acre site for the Universal Kids theme park. Right now, it's a lot of below the grade stuff. I mean, they're doing utilities, sewerage, putting the stuff in place that they need to do foundation work for the 300 room hotel. But that said, Universal is still going to spend $550 million on this park that is strictly aimed at kids 5, 6, 7. So,
well, it's a race against the clock for me. They need to finish in time so my kid is still young enough. Right. So let's get on it. Hopefully they're hiring some smart people, some fast people, get things going.
Well, now it's interesting you mentioned that because a number of folks who are now working for Universal are Disney vets. In fact, Josh Shipley, who was at Walt Disney Imagineering from 1996 through 2017. In fact, it's kind of ironic. We were just talking about Mission Breakout, the Galaxy of Guardians of the Galaxy redo of Tower of Terror at California Adventure. That was literally Josh's last project for Disney before he was helping Joe Rohde before he walked out the door. And he just announced on May 1st that he's joined Universal Creative as a creative director over there. So that's a great get.
I'm gonna have to look up some of his work. I always appreciate what do they call them? They're not Imagineers over there. What are they special magicians or something?
Oh, what we had that name, didn't we? The one.
Well, we're just putting this out there so everybody else is screaming at their phones. If you're screaming at your phones, leave a comment what that is. Help us in the algorithm there. See, we set you guys up.
Wasn't it something like Cinemagician?
I think something? So. I think that is actually what they wrote. So, which plays well to something that comes up a little bit later in the show.
Okay. So, all right. Well, speaking of the latter part of the show, we are now at my personal favorite segment for the Epic Universal podcast, and that is News or Now. News or Not.
Well, Jim, it is kind of news or now because spoiler alert for everyone, we got news stories. There's not too much fluff in these pieces.
No, not at all. Eric did yeoman's work pulling this stuff together here. So why don't we just get to it? And let's start with the first story in the pile here.
Well, we know DreamWorks Land is coming. We knew it was getting done. We kind of saw all the action happening. We even talked about it a couple episodes ago, and they announced it is June 14th. That is when DreamWorks Land officially opens, and that's not the only thing that's happening in DreamWorks Land. But if you want the full breakdown of what happened, what's going on in there, find our episode that we talk about Super Mario and DreamWorks Land. It's a couple episodes ago.
Well, and what's also interesting is, for example, if you go over to the Universal Orlando website, they themselves now are just sort of priming the pump. Yeah, I mean, for example, the official description of this new area that's opening at Universal Studios Florida is get ready to play in a colorful, imaginative new land. And again, Universal Studios Florida, meet Shrek and splash into swamp, scream with laughter on the roller coaster, and learn kung fu moves with Poe. Now, quick aside here, Eric, we had on the last show sort of put out there now, it's like, now, wait a minute, what's going on with the old Day in the Park with Barney theater? Right. And what's interesting is buried down deep in this press release, a pile of press releases that Universal pushed out last week, was info about what's going on with the theater. It's going to be home to the new Imagination Celebration show, and evidently the what's interesting is this venue, which had a in the round layout when it had the Barney show in there, that's remaining, but the gimmick this time around is you go in as an audience and you're then encouraged to sort of stare up at the ceiling. You're cloud gazing so to speak. And that over the course of the show, this will be a celebration of all sorts of DreamWorks characters. And this will be done using projected media, singers, dancers, animated performers, and puppeteers. So very family-friendly show, but for me, I just love the fact that the great theater setup that they had there for A Day in the Park with Barney is being reused. Now, mind you, Day in the Park with Barney opened at Universal Studios Florida back in June of '95. It closed, Eric, February of 2021, with almost 2 full years before the Fun Zone closed for its DreamWorks inspired redo. And what's worth noting here is that Barney closed pretty much in the same window of time that Mark Woodbury, the longtime head of Universal Creative, when he became the chairman and CEO of all of the Universal Parks and Experiences back in 2021. And I think you and I have talked about Mark on previous podcasts in the series, where Mark's the guy who believes that, Universal doesn't need to license outside properties. It has a pretty deep bench now when it comes to IP. And so it's like, we don't need to pay the Barney people. We have characters of our own we can use these
Barney's
days.
made enough money through the years.
Well, no, but
He's
the
fine.
irony, the absolute irony of this story is February of last year, Mattel announced that it would be relaunching the Barney franchise with a brand new animated series that's going to debut this year, 2024. And how would you like to be? Just think about it. What if Barney becomes the next Bluey?
Oh gosh. No, we don't need it. Listen, I've gone many years with Barney. We've had birthday parties for Barney. Let Barney retire in peace. Let him go. But no, that won't they be, if it turns out to be a big one, they're like, well, we're going to have to bring him into the show. He'll start looking at the clouds. We'll bring him in. Okay. That's very interesting.
That is interesting. Okay, now also part of again this wad of press releases that Universal Parks and Experiences put out there. They were talking about a new nighttime show for Wizarding World, right?
Right, Hogwarts Always. So that'll debut, and it's Hogsmeade will get to enjoy a projection show. But I think it's kind of interesting because it actually has 4 different endings. So have we? I mean, I don't know if we've ever seen a projection show with 4 different endings. That's new.
Well, yeah, and what that keys off of, I mean, anybody who's a Harry Potter fan knows that there are 4 houses at Hogwarts, the Hufflepuff, Slytherin, Gryffindor, and Ravenclaw.
Right.
And so that evidently, depending on the night you're there, this new show, which is basically the entire year at Hogwarts. In fact, the show supposedly starts off with you getting your letter that you've been accepted at Hogwarts, and then you have the Yule Ball, and you have Halloween activities and the like. But it ends with whatever house wins that year, and evidently this will be randomized depending on the night you're there. So now, for me, I love the history of the projection shows in Hogwarts, in the Wizarding World, because I was lucky enough to be there for the first one. This was actually done as a special bit of entertainment for the opening night of the very first Wizarding World in Hogsmeade Village in June of 2010. But it was a one night only thing, Eric, and the thing of it, the reason that is they used actual footage from the films to individual scenes to the wonderful John Williams score, but it was a one and done because it's like, well, we don't really have the rights to do this for more than one night.
Okay.
But it was, people loved it so much that when they opened the second Wizarding World over at Universal Japan in July of 2014, they did the same thing. And then again, I was lucky enough to score an invite to the opening of the Wizarding World in Hollywood in April of 2016. And sure enough, same thing. They had a live orchestra on stage directed by John Williams, and they did that projection show again. But somebody in entertainment at Universal was like, this is too good. We have to figure out a way to bring this into the park. People will eat this up. More to the point, they will stand here in Hogsmeade Village waiting for the show to start, and they will buy their $10 butterbeer. Speaking of which, did you see a brand new flavor of butterbeer just got introduced in the Wizarding World? We now have, wait for it, butterbeer ice lollies. You ready for those, Eric?
Well, I'm ready for any butterbeer. Okay. This is one thing where being the rookie just doesn't pay off. I don't have the excitement because I really don't know what it tastes like, but I'm gearing up. I think once I finally have that butterbeer, I'll have that same enthusiasm as you.
Okay. Well, no. You have to understand that I'm the diabetic. If I have butterbeer, I go straight into a coma.
Well, you shouldn't be that excited then, Jim. I mean, literally, your pitch went up a little bit when you talked about butterbeer. So it did. Be careful.
I'll buy the ice lolly. I'll have a taste and then pass it on. But
hey, I'll tell you what. You know what will make my pitch go up and I get excited about? This is actually the Mega Movie Parade announcement is actually what got me the most excited out of all the announcements. Now, we saw those social media little clips that were teasing all this retro stuff, but this essentially is a float with, it's a parade with 13 brand new floats, nearly 100 performers. So I said to myself, I've never really counted floats. So I said to myself, what's the parade that I've seen the most? And that's a Festival of Fantasy. Jim, any idea of how many floats are at the Festival of Fantasy?
No.
Nine. So we get 4 more floats than that one. And I think that's a pretty impressive, thing. So we're getting this is not just a small parade. I did not.
Well, it is so interesting. You bring up the 15 floats versus the 9 floats, because that actually brings us to the next thing here on the pile, the new nighttime what is it, the symphonic spectacular that's going to be staged out on Universal Lagoon, and it kind of has a parallel component with the new parade, in that it's a celebration of things like Harry Potter, Ghostbusters, and the like. But it also has drones, right?
Yeah, it sounds like there's more than 600 drones, Jim. So there's a lot of drones that's going to be flying around the sky. This summer in just the Orlando area?
Yeah, but here's the thing. Okay, so this parade, this nighttime show debuts on June 14th, which, by the way, at the same time that the DreamWorks thing opens up. Worth noting here, just want to put this out there. If you're going for the new parade, that doesn't debut till like July 3rd, right? So
correct.
I want to be sure that we stress that new nighttime show and DreamWorks Land, they open, and in fact, the new projection show in Hogwarts Forever, that's also on June 14th. But the parade doesn't show up till 3 weeks later. But here's the thing: 3 weeks before that, on May 26th, we get a new drone show over at Disney Springs. We get what's it called? The Disney Dreams That Soar. It's going to be presented over Lake Buena Vista, limited time run, May 24th through September 2nd, as I understand it. But here's the thing: the Universal show has over 600 drones, whereas the Disney show is supposed to have 500, and it's like just the fact that they are that competitive. But at the same time, what's the beauty part about these two giant entertainment conglomerates being this competitive is we get good stuff. I mean, that in fact, Eric and I were just talking about, as we were pre-gaming the show tonight, the notion that sometime this summer we're going to be able to see a spectacular drone show at Universal, and then hop in the car and drive over to Disney, and in the same night see an equally spectacular drone show over Lake Buena Vista. That's a win-win as far as I'm concerned.
Right. Lots of drones in the air. Orlando will be lit clearly by all of our flying friends.
Okay. Now, so we spent a lot of time on this show talking about stuff that's going on in Florida. To be fair here, I guess we should talk about what's going on also in Hollywood. And you have an update on the big
Well,
coaster.
this one I was not very familiar with. So, as I scroll through Twitter and so forth, I kept seeing this happen. So at some point in time, the Fast and the Furious Hollywood Drift roller coaster to open in 2026 at Universal Studios Hollywood. So I didn't know anything about it, right? I have no idea. But there was a lot of chatter on the internet talking about, hold on, shouldn't this opened earlier, so forth. So, being a relative newbie, I'm like, what is this, and why are we all kind of up in arms about it? So,
well, okay. Now, just to give a little background here, because what's intriguing about this coaster is they're building it on the hillside next to the upper lot. And for example, back in January of 2023, they actually had to shut down the animal actors and special effects stage that was located in this area, so they could then create the queue space and the load platform. And then the hillside directly behind this that held the God, how long had the Universal City sign been there? But that all had to go as they built all of the track for this amazing coaster that is 360-degree turning radius and no noise reduction and all that. The other aspect of this coaster is that what's a polite way of putting this? Universal Hollywood has pain in the ass neighbors. I mean, don't get me wrong. These are people who bought homes, who don't necessarily like the idea that they'll be sitting in their lovely multi-million-dollar home and be able to hear a roller coaster. So, for example, the noise reduction technology. In fact, I think we've talked in a previous Epic Universal podcast about how one of the reasons the coaster cars in this thing will turn is that they will orient you as a guest riding in this car in such a way that you will scream into the park rather than out toward the multi-million-dollar homes. And but you're not wrong. There's a number of people who said, well, look, the Fast and the Furious film series, the grand finale, the 11th film in the series, is coming out April 4th of next year. So wouldn't it make sense that in 2025, the very same year that the film series is ending, that Universal would have some sort of big premiere for this this new amazing coaster? But evidently, because of these pain in the ass neighbors, this will be one of the longest tests and adjusts that have ever been done for a Universal attraction, just to make sure that this cutting edge sound reduction technology actually works. And
hold on. I got to call Len real quick and ask how many Trons this is. Is it what's the construction limit on this? No. All right. That makes a lot of sense, Jim, why it's taking, why it's so long, or what's causing the issues of the noise. That's what I wasn't able to find online. It was just people complaining. Yeah. That's why you come here. You talk to Jim Hill. He'll tell you what's up.
Yeah. But at the same time, when you look at what Universal did just this past couple of weeks, I mean, for example, they had their Fall Guy movie come out, arrive in theaters just this past Friday. And so the notion was to raise awareness of this film. They started staging a Fall Guy Stuntacular pre-show out ahead of the Waterworld show at Universal Hollywood. And in fact, and again, to give you some idea of how these studios, these leverage corporations, use the theme parks to promote their films, Ryan Gosling was actually there on Saturday, April 27th for the first performance of and it was a really lengthy pre-show. I mean, it's like 25 minutes before the Waterworld thing begins, which is another 45 minutes.
That's like 3 tiki rooms.
There we
back
go.
to back. Come on.
There we go. So
that's pretty long.
Now, The irony here, of course, is that Gosling does all of this publicity for the Fall Guy. In fact, they have this amazing premiere that's filled with stunts that gets all sorts of coverage on all sorts of media. And like we said, this Universal picture arrives in theaters on May 3rd. Was initially projected to make $30 million in ticket sales in North America, came in slightly under that number, $28 million. And so to hear folks in the trade stock, the Fall Guy was kind of a disappointing start to the summer blockbuster season. But anyway, just so you know, if you're headed to the Universal Hollywood Park, you can still catch the Fall Guys Stuntacular pre-show. It will run in that park through Sunday, May 19th. So what? We've got 2 weekends yet.
Yep.
If you're not going to be there in time to see that show, there's still all the 60th anniversary tram tour stuff going on. And I just want to put out there, has anybody experienced the Runaway Train yet? And if so, what's that like? And also, and I'm asking this on behalf of your bride, who I do the I Want That Too podcast or video show with, which is about merch. I have to ask, has anybody actually purchased the Woody Woodpecker popcorn bucket that's like the tram yet? Because somebody was just showing the video of it, and it turns out if you push it on the floor, the wheels move and Woody's arms inside the cab move as well. And it's like, that looks so
Woody.
cool.
He's making his way to the Popcorn Bucket Hall of Fame with that one.
There we go.
Sit next to Jabba the Hutt and maybe the Imagination Pavilion. So,
but at the same time, it looks like it's the size of an old console television. I mean, I have questions. Where are you displaying this thing? So. All right. Well, anyway, folks, that I believe. Oh, no, wait a minute. You again, we have the nicest listeners. We have folks who have been kind enough to get behind the show, and we got some mail you wanted to share. Right?
Well, I find it great. So we, the Universal Curious, are banding together, and I'm getting messages. And this one was unique. We mentioned, Jim, on a passing episode, we talked a little bit about how much it costs, annual pass holders, what's the price, and DisneyFans.com tweeted at us and just let us know that they saved. They decided that the annual pass was the way to go at Universal. It saved them a lot more money than the Disney Universal or the Disney annual pass. So I thought that was very interesting. That number one, we are getting DisneyFans.com giving Universal tips. I love that. That's pretty. We're ending the tribalism, Jim, one at a time, myself included. We're finally just embracing all theme parks and embracing all the good. It did take me into the rabbit hole of, all right, annual passes, how many days do you need to go? And correct me if I'm wrong, listeners out there that know your stuff a little bit more, but it looks to me like you can get an annual pass at Universal roughly around $500 for like the lowest tier. So that would be like a point even break would be like 6 or 7 visits. So when it comes down to when I'm planning, I actually even had someone tell me, a friend of mine said, no, just go with the annual pass if you're going to go once even. And so it's very interesting. But thank you guys for reaching out. That makes it really easy for us to learn, myself to learn, to get more information. You can always find me at Eric Hersey over on X or Instagram. So, Jim, where could people, if they want to give you information, where could they find you?
Well, I am still on X, Twitter, likewise Instagram as Jim Hill Media, over on Facebook at Jim Hill Media News, and while we're doing gratuitous plugs here, I also want to remind you we do have some other podcasts here at the Jim Hill Media Podcast Network. We of course have Disney Dish, which I do with Len Testa. We also have Fine Tuning that I do with Drew Taylor. That's animation, news, and commentary there. But also a quick aside here, I want to remind you that Drew and his partner Charles Hood do the wonderful Light the Fuse, the official Mission Impossible podcast. That's really worth checking out. Let's see, Brian Gahn and I will be recording a brand new Looking at Lucasfilm later this week. He was he made the effort to go to Disneyland on May the 4th.
Oh
and
boy. Did he come out
things did
alive?
well. He didn't make it in, but that's the story. We'll get that on the other
you guys
show.
have real quick. You guys have been killing it over on that podcast. I love everything you guys are doing. So keep up the good work there.
Oh well, that's good to hear. I will share that with Mr. Gahn. And another show I think we're doing good stuff with is the one I do with your lovely bride Lauren. The I Want That Too. In fact, I think she and I are slated to knock another one of that out later this week. So
is it about jelly jars, Jim?
No,
not this time. You guys need to check that out. That was a really cool episode. But something else that everybody should check out certainly is the Disney Unpacked that you, Len Testa, Jim Schul. We just launched the stunt show, the stunt show spectacular episode over on Patreon.
Yeah, and in fact, Jim Schul and I will be recording the carry-on follow-up to that show tomorrow, where I actually found really for real documentation on the, I kid you not, Eric, this is what they called it back in the day, the Tinker Bellicopter. The remote controlled Tinkerbell that was supposed to fly over the park, but again, we'll get to that. Beyond that, again, as we mentioned at the top of the show here, because there was so much news, we had to push off the second half of that Universal Classic Monsters story that we had as the feature last time around. And I promise, next show we will take you from Castle Dracula to Fortress Dracula and talk about how a little movie called Van Helsing had what that had to do with that whole situation going south. So
that's perfect, Jim, because that gives me a little bit more time to actually watch the full Van Helsing. I got the first 20 minutes in last night. So so we're good to go.
Okay.
And I would love to hear your opinion. I know you caught it just recently. We'll talk about that up and more. But on behalf of Jim today, I'm Eric Hersey. Thanks everyone for listening. We'll see you next show.
Take care.